When you think about a really high-stakes environment, like, say, an operating room, or even the floor of the stock exchange during a massive sell-off,
Right, yeah.
you expect the machinery to just work. I mean, the pressure is immense, the talent is supposedly top tier, and everyone knows their highly specialized role, right?
Mhm.
The engine is just supposed to hum.
Exactly. It's supposed to be this finely tuned system where ideally the external pressure actually creates internal focus. The friction is supposed to sharpen the blades, not completely shatter them.
Yeah, but what happens when that pressure doesn't just test the machine, but it actually causes the operators to actively sabotage it from the inside?
Oh, man. Then you go from a well-oiled machine to an absolute system failure.
Totally. And that messy, like deeply psychological reality is exactly what we saw in the shocking conclusion of the 2026 World Cup Group H.
Right.
I mean, we saw massive footballing giants just absolutely collapse under their own weight.
Yeah, and at the exact same time, we witnessed one of the most historic underdog stories emerge from the wreckage.
Right.
It really serves as a masterclass in extremes. On one side, you have these teams crippled by internal toxicity and the suffocating weight of expectations, and on the other, you have a squad playing with, well, total liberation.
Which is wild to watch. So to figure out the mechanics behind both those extremes for you today, we've pulled together a really massive stack of sources.
We really have.
Yeah, we were pulling match reports from Fox Sports, The Guardian, Squawka, and FMT. Plus, we're diving into the broadcast transcripts from CBS Sports and ITV Sport. Oh, and we are also tracking real-time fan reactions from Reddit.
Which is so important. I mean, the fan reaction is a crucial barometer here, especially when you are looking at a collapse that feels this personal to the supporters. Sometimes that raw, unfiltered emotion highlights the tactical failures way better than the raw data does.
I completely agree. So the mission today isn't just to recap a soccer game for you. We're going to explore this as a fascinating case study in modern leadership, team psychology, and adaptability.
Right, because we want to figure out how a tiny island nation of just 524,000 people manages to outlast a two-time world champion.
Exactly. Okay, let's unpack this, starting with the absolute implosion of Uruguay.
Man, it is really the only place to start, because Uruguay's group stage exit, which culminated in that 1-0 loss to Spain, wasn't just a defeat on the grass.
Well, not at all.
The systemic breakdown happened completely off the pitch. The Guardian's reporting on the locker room environment is honestly staggering.
What were they saying?
So in the days leading up to the Spain match, 4 senior Uruguayan players, we're talking Sergio Rocher, Manuel Ugarte, Rodrigo Bentancur, and Federico Valverde.
The heavy hitters.
Exactly. They basically cornered their manager, Marcelo Bielsa.
And we really have to contextualize Bielsa for a second for anyone who doesn't know. He is considered one of the godfathers of modern tactical football.
Absolutely. A legend.
But the man is a theoretician who demands absolute, just unquestioning physical exertion from his squads. Like, he runs them into the ground.
And that rigid philosophy is exactly what sparked the mutiny here.
Right.
These players who, let's remember, are tactical elites playing for top clubs in Europe, they went to him begging for 2 things.
Okay.
First, they complained that his training methods were so ferocious they were actively causing muscle fatigue and injuries before the match even started.
Wow.
And second, they explicitly asked to change the tactics against Spain to a low block.
Which, honestly, looking at Spain's reliance on drawing the press to exploit space behind that is a completely pragmatic request. You just sit deep, compress the space, and hit them on the counter.
It makes total sense. But Bielsa's response to this tactical feedback was to just reject it entirely.
Of course it was.
He called a team meeting and delivered a 48-minute lecture.
Wait, 48 minutes.
48 minutes, demanding they mirror Spain's setup. Just an eyes-down harangue where he treated these Champions League winners like academy kids who didn't understand the sport.
That is insane.
It got so toxic that several players reportedly walked out of the room mid-lecture.
Oh,
Yeah, the defender Ronald Araujo was quoted saying, "God willing we advance, but this can't be endured any longer."
that phrase, "this can't be endured any longer," that points to a really profound psychological breaking point.
It really does.
I mean, when the environment becomes entirely about the manager's ego and protecting his theoretical dogma, the players just stop playing for the badge. They start playing in spite of the manager.
Yeah, absolutely.
It actually makes me think of Bielsa like a brilliant but incredibly toxic tech founder, You know the archetype,
Oh,
right?
definitely.
They have this old school, grind it out, sleep under your desk management style. And it might have worked when they were a scrappy startup 20 years ago, disrupting the industry.
Right, when they had nothing to lose.
Exactly.
Hmm.
But now the company has scaled, the talent has evolved, and that dictatorial rigidity just drives away all the top engineers.
That analogy tracks perfectly, especially when you consider how extreme stress causes leaders to regress to their comfort zones. Instead of adapting to the talent in the room, Bielsa just doubled down on his authority.
Let me push back on this narrative a little bit, though, or at least look at the broader landscape for you.
Sure.
Is this purely a clash of generations? Because the CBS broadcast brought up a really compelling point about the modern player's psychology.
Okay.
They argued today's players need an arm around the shoulder. They actually compared it to Carlo Ancelotti's man management at Real Madrid, rather than a manager who will constantly, bite into you and demand perfection through fear.
Right, the old school discipline.
Yeah, so are we just seeing the final extinction of the dictatorial manager in 2026?
Well, what's fascinating here is that while the generational shift toward empathetic leadership is real, Bielsa's ultimate failure was something much more destructive than just being a demanding dinosaur.
What do you mean?
It was an act of managerial martyrdom. He essentially self-sabotaged the match to prove a point.
Wait, really? How?
Look at his decision-making in the 56th minute against Spain. Uruguay is down 1-0. Their tournament life is basically evaporating. They desperately need a goal, right?
Yeah, they need offense.
And Bielsa substitutes his captain and arguably his most dynamic ball carrier, Federico Valverde.
Hold on, the exact same Valverde who led the mutiny against him earlier in the week.
Precisely.
Wow.
Yeah, Fox Sports rightfully called the substitution unforgivable. You don't take off your primary engine in the midfield when you need to transition the ball up the pitch.
No, never.
Tactical stubbornness is one thing, but this looked like a manager consciously settling personal scores on his way out the door, prioritizing his authority over the nation's survival.
That is just brutal. So you have a toxic culture, a manager engaged in a cold war with his own dressing room, and players who are physically exhausted from training.
Yep.
I'm really curious how that fractured culture translates to the physical mechanics on the grass. Because at the end of the day, you still have 11 guys who have to play the game.
Well, when psychological safety evaporates, it manifests mechanically through frantic indiscipline and individual cognitive errors.
Okay.
The players stop trusting the system, so they try to force outcomes individually.
Which usually ends badly.
Yeah.
I mean, the indiscipline was certainly glaring. Uruguay committed 28 fouls in the match against Spain.
That's a huge number.
It is. And that isn't tactical fouling. That is sheer, unregulated frustration. And then Agustin Canobio gets a straight red card in stoppage time for a cynical, just wild lunge on Pau Cabarsi.
Right.
It was just a spiteful, ugly snapshot of a broken team.
Right.
But the true human tragedy of this match, I think, centers on their goalkeeper, Fernando Muslera.
Oh, Muslera's performance is the ultimate symbol of Bielsa's regression to his comfort zone.
I was looking at a timeline of Muslera's career, and it makes this even more baffling.
Yeah.
He is 40 years old. He actually retired from international football in 2024.
Right, he was done.
Yeah, before the 2022 World Cup, he'd already lost his starting job to Sergio Rocher. And Rocher, by all accounts, was in brilliant form. He was commanding his box well.
He really was.
But Bielsa, feeling his authority under threat, insists on bringing Muslera out of retirement for this tournament. He leans on the old loyalist. And what happens?
Yeah.
Alex Baena takes a relatively weak shot for Spain, and the biomechanics of a 40-year-old keeper just fail him. His reaction time is a fraction of a second late, his footwork is heavy, and the ball squirms right through his hands.
It's just agonizing to watch, and the data from Squawka puts this into a brutal historical context.
Let's hear it.
Muslera is now the first goalkeeper since 1966 to make an error leading to a goal in all 3 group stage matches of a World Cup.
Since 1966.
Yes. It sets an all-time record of 5 career World Cup errors for him.
That stat alone shows how deeply flawed the personnel selection was.
Totally.
And to add physical injury to the psychological trauma, Manuel Ugarte was stretchered off in the first half with a serious knee injury, which was likely exacerbated by the intense training loads the players had literally warned Bielsa about.
Right, the exact thing they feared. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, the tactical data reveals a massive, almost cruel irony here.
What's that?
Despite the mutiny, despite the toxicity, Uruguay's iteration of the low block was actually incredibly effective at neutralizing Spain.
Wow, I actually noticed that on the heat maps. The very plan the players begged for, and Bielsa hated, was actually working when they executed on the pitch.
It really was. They essentially dropped into a disciplined six-man defensive line out of possession.
Right.
By choking the half spaces, they forced Spain to funnel the ball into the less precise wide channels. According to Squawka, Uruguay forced 18 high turnovers from Spain in the first half alone.
That's huge.
And they won 64% of their ground duels. They were completely stifling Spain's rhythm.
So the defensive architecture was actually sound.
Very sound. It was literally a single goalkeeping howler from a player Bielsa inexplicably shoehorned into the lineup that broke the structure.
That is the ultimate tragedy of poor leadership. The team actually had the right strategic instincts, but the manager's ego created a structural flaw that sank the entire ship.
Exactly.
Now, if Uruguay's collapse was this spectacular, fiery explosion, transitioning to Spain is like watching a sputtering engine that somehow managed to coast across the finish line.
That's a great way to put it.
Let's shift to the victors, because honestly, a team burdened by their own tactical history can be just as paralyzed as a team fighting its manager.
Oh, for sure. I mean, Spain won 1-0 and clinched the group, but as the Fox Sports panel pointed out, they severely lacked their traditional swagger. They just looked predictable.
The stats paint a very specific picture of stagnation for them. They held 68% possession, which is standard for Spain.
Right. Very typical.
But they only managed one single shot on target all night.
And that one shot was Baena's goal, which is essentially a gift from Muslera.
Right.
Now, the ITV broadcast did highlight a brilliant piece of movement leading up to it. Baena had a great swivel, assisted by a perfectly timed overlapping run from Marcos Llorente.
Yeah, I saw that Sports Dunia gave Llorente an 8.4 rating.
Which is well-deserved, making him the standout performer by injecting some actual verticality into the game. But as a collective unit, Spain looked completely devoid of ideas.
I was looking at their passing metrics, and this is what really stood out to me. Their pass completion dropped to 89%.
Which sounds good, but...
Yeah. Exactly. For a normal national team, 89% is fantastic. But Spain relies on metronomic 93 to 95% passing accuracy to maintain their defensive structure through possession.
Right.
Dropping below 90% means they were giving up the ball in transition, which they hate.
Yeah.
Rodri, usually the undisputed engine of the team, looked incredibly slow and labored.
Yeah, he did.
And Lamine Yamal had to be subbed off at 75 minutes to manage a lingering hamstring issue. Nico Williams didn't even start, only coming on for the final 15 minutes.
The drop in passing accuracy is a direct result of how Uruguay forced them to play. When you are pushed into the wide channels and your wingers aren't fully fit, you start forcing crosses or making lateral passes that get intercepted.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, and I have to play devil's advocate against the media narrative here for a second.
Go for it.
I hear the pundits complaining that Spain looks boring and stodgy. But if you look at their overall record, Spain is 34 competitive games unbeaten. They haven't conceded a single goal in this entire tournament. And they are advancing as group winners to play either Austria or Algeria. Why is the media panning a team that just executed a mathematically perfect group stage run?
It's a fair challenge, you know. On paper, 0 goals conceded and 9 points is flawless.
Right.
But the criticism isn't about the points, it's about the mechanics of how they're playing. Specifically, how they fail to unlock deep defensive structures.
Okay.
Squawka's tactical breakdown of Spain's midfield positioning exposed a massive flaw. Their central midfielders, Pedri and Mikel Merino, were pushing way too high up the pitch, essentially standing on the toes of the forwards.
I see. So it's like an hourglass where all the sand is stuck in the top bulb.
Exactly.
Spain had all this possession in the attacking third, but the neck of the hourglass, which is Rodri, was completely clogged and isolated, so no actual creative play flowed through to create chances.
That is exactly the dynamic. Rodri was left at the base of the midfield with a massive gap between him and his creative outlets. When you have 68% possession, but you are just circulating the ball in a U shape around a park defense, you aren't manipulating the opposition. You are just passing time.
Right. You're not hurting them.
Right. In the knockout stages, against tighter, more physical defenses, this risk-averse, horizontal passing will be punished. If they don't have Yamal and Williams fully fit to blow past defenders on the wings, Spain lacks a mechanical plan B to break lines.
That makes total sense. The concern isn't the results they've gotten against disorganized teams. The concern is the glaring mechanical vulnerabilities they're taking into the sudden death environment of the knockouts.
Exactly.
Which leads us perfectly to the absolute best part of this entire deep dive.
Oh, I've been waiting for this.
We've talked about Uruguay buckling under the weight of internal toxicity. We've talked about Spain suffocating under their own rigid tactical history and the burden of expectation.
Yeah.
Now let's look at a team operating with absolute unadulterated freedom, the ultimate foil to both of these giants. Cape Verde.
The LinkedIn fairy tale. It is easily the most compelling narrative of the tournament.
It is genuinely hard to fathom the logistics of this. We are talking about a nation of just 524,000 people.
Tiny.
They are ranked 67th in the world by FIFA. And they just secured their spot in the knockout stages of the World Cup after a gritty 0-0 draw with Saudi Arabia.
They finished unbeaten in the group stage. They conceded only 2 goals across 3 matches, playing with a level of defensive cohesion that Uruguay and Spain could only dream of.
I am still trying to wrap my head around the mechanics of their scouting network. Because it operates on a budget of virtually zero.
Right.
Their center back, Pico Lopes, was literally recruited via LinkedIn.
It's amazing.
How does a National Football Federation actually scout a player on a corporate networking site?
It's a brilliant example of open source intelligence, or OSINT, applied to sports. Unlike Spain, which has multi-million-dollar scouting networks monitoring every academy player in the country, Cape Verde relies on their diaspora. The Federation staff literally searches platforms like LinkedIn and specialized databases for professional players with Cape Verdean surnames or heritage.
You kidding?
Nope. They DM them, check their club minutes, verify their passports and lineage, and build a national team through grassroots networking.
That is the ultimate testament to resourcefulness.
Yeah.
You have players finding out they've been called up to the World Cup via a direct message next to recruiters asking them if they want to pivot to B2B sales.
Yeah, it's wild.
And the fans on Reddit are absolutely eating it up. They are clamoring for statues to be built of the Cape Verdean goalkeeper, Vozinha.
Oh, he was incredible.
One thread noted he is probably one of the most followed goalkeepers on Instagram right now, purely based on his heroic shot stopping in this group stage. So what does this all mean? Looking at the contrast, how does a team with a decentralized, zero-budget LinkedIn recruitment strategy defensively outlast a footballing powerhouse like Uruguay?
This raises an important question about the actual value of psychological safety in modern coaching environments.
How so?
We spent the first half of this discussion dissecting Marcelo Bielsa's intense, toxic, incredibly rigid camp, where players were driven to the point of mutiny, right?
Right.
Now contrast that with Cape Verde's camp. Their coach, Bubista, paces the touchlines wearing jeans.
Just casual denim on the world's biggest stage. It sets such a specific tone.
It really does. It signals a complete lack of pretense. The CBS sports analyst highlighted this dynamic beautifully. Bubista doesn't scream at his players when they misplace a pass.
Unlike Bielsa.
Exactly. He doesn't throw tactical tantrums or deliver 48-minute lectures. He acts as an emotional anchor, keeping his players calm, putting an arm around them, and fostering a culture of absolute unwavering belief.
He trusts his players to execute rather than trying to micromanage every blade of grass they step on.
Exactly. And this connects to a much broader, incredibly exciting trend we are seeing unfold at this tournament, which is the rise of African football on the global stage.
Oh yeah, we've definitely seen that.
Just look at Senegal securing a historic 5-0 win over Iraq, becoming the first African side to ever score 5 goals in a World Cup match.
Incredible.
What we are seeing with the success of Cape Verde and Senegal is empirical proof that psychological safety, confidence, and a supportive environment will often neutralize and defeat rigid tactical dogma.
It really redefines what we consider an advantage, you know? Tactical brilliance and raw talent can only get you so far if the underlying culture is broken. If the players are actively fighting the system will eventually collapse under its own friction.
The contrast in Group H couldn't be starker. Fear creates hesitation. Freedom creates flow.
Which brings this entire deep dive right back to you, listening to this right now. Because you don't need to be a professional soccer manager navigating a World Cup group stage to apply these mechanics to your own life.
No, not at all.
Think about your own workplace or a project you are managing. When you are leading a team under immense pressure, do you default to the Bielsa method? Do you double down on your authority, enforce rigid rules, and deliver the equivalent of a 48-minute lecture when someone suggests a different software tool or a new approach?
Or do you adopt the Bubista method? Prioritizing psychological safety, trusting your team's instincts, and creating an environment where they aren't afraid to make a mistake.
Exactly. Group H proves that a supportive culture and adaptability will almost always outperform dictatorial brilliance, even if you have to recruit your talent on LinkedIn.
A unified team playing without fear of reprisal is an incredibly dangerous entity, no matter how few resources they have.
And speaking of dangerous entities, let's look ahead to what happens next. Because Cape Verde's reward for this historic, unbeaten run through the group stage is a knockout match against none other than Lionel Messi and Argentina.
Wow. It is the ultimate David versus Goliath scenario, played out on the biggest stage imaginable.
But based on everything we've unpacked today, it leaves us with something really compelling to think about. Remember that high-stakes pressure cooker environment we talked about at the very beginning? The crushing expectations that caused Uruguay to short-circuit and Spain to stagnate. Argentina carries the agonizing weight of expectations of an entire nation every single time they step onto the pitch.
The pressure is astronomical.
But Cape Verde, they have absolutely zero expectations, zero pressure, and a locker room culture built on unshakable belief. So I leave you with this to ponder. When a team with absolutely nothing to lose meets a giant carrying the suffocating weight of history, could the ultimate underdog story expose yet another broken machine?
Given what we've seen in Group H, I certainly wouldn't bet against them exposing some flaws.
We will definitely be watching the mechanics of that matchup closely. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.